All right, we're actually going to have our panel on what is true agile. I'll just do a quick introduction to introduce our panel moderator, Tao Dang. Tao Dang is the head of enterprise modernization platforms and clouds for ThoughtWorks Southeast Asia. She advises organizations in their technical landscape to shift towards a more modern architecture by leveraging platform and cloud strategies. She's got 16 years of experience on her belt, and she's led a lot of teams with their agile development practices working towards faster value creation. Tao is a big fan of outdoors and outdoor sports. She can do it all. So she rock climbs, she kayaks, she snowboards, she wakeboards. She can do it all. She most recently was in Malaysia, where she was rock climbing at the Batu Cave. So welcome Tao Dang onto the stage.
Thank you. Please come out the rest. Hi, thank you very much for staying with us until the end. I was really worried that we would be talking to an empty room, so really great to see you guys here. And with me today, I have three awesome colleagues that I have the fortune to work quite closely with. So I'll hand over to Chad to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Chad. I've been in the software development space for about 19 years, last 16 here in Singapore, and 5 of those with ThoughtWorks in Singapore. My journey with Agile started in 2010 with a kind of bottom-up engineering-driven transformation at a previous job I worked at. Like maybe many of you, with a kind of Scrum training by an external vendor and with some extreme programming, engineering practices stuff alongside that. And since then, I've been working within teams and with teams to help people get more of the value out of Agile, understand the principles and practices, and build better software together. So I hope to share some of that with you today.
Over to you, Shyam.
Okay, hi, I'm Shyam. I lead the digital transformation practice for Southeast Asia. So unlike Chad, my journey began by dismissing Agile. So I said it's post-it nonsense, I don't believe in it. I was a very strong proponent of Gantt charts, deadlines, everything that most developers hate, I was a big proponent of it. Until I really saw what really Agile delivery can do. Right? It was a marked difference from how I operated to what it could offer. And then I joined ThoughtWorks, played a host of roles from business analyst to project managers. So that's my journey.
And hi, I'm Florian. I'm currently the head of technology for the region, but I'm a developer at heart and have been doing so for the last 8 years. So I've been a developer, I've been an infrastructure consultant, I've been a team lead, and I've been a consultant advising different companies on their Agile journey. So when I think about this true Agile topic, I'm thinking about the organizations that got it right and that built amazing businesses out of agility, but I'm also thinking about the different organizations that are still struggling, right? And we know some of those companies, you might know some of those. So I bet we'll talk a little bit about both of those kinds of companies today.
Cool. Thank you for the introduction. So, awesome. Good to see the encouragement. Thank you, everyone. And just as the last session, I promise it'll be the last time you raise your hand. So can I just get a hand raise of anyone who's heard of the Agile Manifesto? Oh, wow. This is super awesome. That's great. And I just want to flash it up here to remind us of the manifesto and a little bit of history where it came from. So I think in 2001, a group of very strong senior technologists got together for a weekend away skiing. And that turned into a philosophical conversation around software delivery and how can we make it better. And this is what we get out of that. So they've got the Agile Manifesto and a lot of principles that drove these manifestos. And I think that weekend is the weekend that changed the world of software development for good. And in our session today, we will hope to kind of break down what does it actually mean to be agile and also take some of the questions from the audience. And thank you so much for sending through your questions throughout the day. We've picked out what we think are the most challenging ones, so that we can put the panelists to the test. And so just before we get going, who here have or is currently working in an agile environment, or doing some kind of flavor of agile? Okay, we've got some hands raised. And who here can say that they are truly agile? Awesome. I can see a couple and a half-raised hand. So maybe let us get started with, what does it actually mean to be agile, to truly be agile? I'll hand over to Shyam, maybe, to help us.
Okay. I would say being agile, right? To me, it's just relentless pursuit of value. Right? When I say that, I say it across the levels. So as an organization, it's about doing what's valuable for your customers. And the relentless pursuit comes in asking yourself the hard questions. Is it truly valuable? What is the feedback telling us? And what are we going to do with that feedback? Mm-hmm. Down to the team, it's going to come down to, are we doing things right? Are we doing the right things, right? And if you look at the manifesto, it talks about the first, they've worded it very well, right? They're calling it as we are uncovering, right? And that means that everybody is in that pursuit of looking for ways to improve.
Absolutely.
If you have that continuous improvement mindset, it will manifest in behaviors, and that will sort of show, right? And if you are truly, for those limited individuals who said they are truly agile, you will know, and I hope you share that with the rest of the folks as well. So that to me is being agile, the state of being in continuous improvement all along, irrespective of your role, irrespective of what you do.
Great. The state of continuous improvement, that's awesome. All right, so maybe over to Chad to give some of your view.
Yeah, thanks, Tao. For me, the Agile is really a set of principles, which it literally is, and the principles that sit alongside the manifesto, but is often forgotten, but also a kind of mental model to think about how we can do this highly collaborative discipline of building software and technology systems in a mission to build better software, whether that's better, more functional software for our users and customers, whether it's more stable, reliable software in production, or just software that can be changed more easily. And do it in a way that allows engineers and other folks involved with the discipline to really hone their craft over time, and to do it in a way that's sustainable and repeatable, perhaps more so than methodologies that predated Agile and have been troublesome for our industry over time. The one area I see that organizations are not quite going in the right direction often is really supporting the bottom-up feedback loop. That's super important within Agile. It's mentioned in one of the principles, in the belief in self-organizing teams, but it really requires creating space and nurturing that bottom-up feedback loop to really get the value out of what I would describe as true Agile. And so I'd like to see organizations really thinking about how to nurture that, create the space, listen to their teams to really be able to get the value out of Agile. So that's what I think about what is truly being Agile.
Cool. Over to you, Florian.
Right. I'm guessing it's so many things, and then it's also so simple, right? It's practices, it's ways of working, it's a mindset, right? But as consultants, you know that if you've worked with us, right, we like to ask why, right? Why are you doing this? Why are you practicing all these things, right? Are you doing TDD because Kent Beck told you to? Are you doing stand-ups because management wanted yet another status meeting? No, right? That's not the reason why we're doing it, right? And I'm with Shyam on that. Ultimately, why we're doing that is because we believe that that's the best way to deliver valuable software. It's the best way for us to deliver value. So you don't really need us here to give you a definition of what true Agile is. You just need to ask yourself, like, the things that we are doing, are those helping us to create more valuable software? Are they bringing value to the business? Are they valuable to our users? Are they valuable to society? If they are, awesome, you're Agile. If they're not, that's where continuous improvement comes in. That's where you can reevaluate, try something different to become more Agile, to create more value.
Awesome. I really like your answer. It kind of wrap up this conversation around True Agile and the spirit of continuous improvement to generate value. I think that's what we're trying to achieve. So one more thing that I was thinking about a lot is that in Singapore in particular, we have a lot of banking, we have government sector, public sector, and a lot of these are quite heavily regulated. And we just spoke about Agile is the ability to continuously improve, to be able to respond to changes in a safe and fast way, right? So being in such a highly regulated environment, how can you still be agile? How can you still move fast while still meeting all of the compliance, meeting all of the checks? So just sharing some experience. So I used to be a developer in an investment bank many, many years ago. And we usually have regulations come out quite often. And I remember one biggest one, I think the MiFID one back in the mid-2000s, where we had to change all of our systems to meet the regulation. And we did whatever we could. We took shortcuts. We did anything we could to actually get our systems ready in time for that regulation. And for me, at the time, I remember being at that investment bank where Agile was just started to be talked about. And I was thinking, wow, look at all of these compliance that we have to meet. Those Agile cowboys probably won't be able to do that. So maybe just bringing it back to the panel in terms of your thoughts in such an industry, how can we still continue to move? Shyam? Open?
It's interesting you said the banking experience because I had a very similar one. And shortcuts do get taken for obvious reasons because my experience is that there's someone who decides something needs to be complied to. There's a whole bunch of planning that happens to which the team which is actually tasked to do it is completely oblivious to, right? Several months of planning, discussions happen, and one fine day, they all come to the development team and say, guys, we have to get this over. You just have a month, right? And we've been discussing this for a year, right? And that's typically the state at which teams are given all of these mandates. And that brings out a very wrong connotation because two things happen. One, trade-offs get taken. And trade-off management becomes an important aspect that the teams will need to give back. So as a sort of bottom-up feedback, they have to say, yes, we can get it done. These are the shortcuts, and that's incurring a debt. And when are we going to pay back, and how are we going to pay back? So that's important. Second is, I personally felt, when I was basically thrown under to make that happen, I felt it would have been a lot easier if we had just been given a sneak preview during those 11 months when they were discussing with the regulators that, hey team, this is coming your way, what can you do about it? A little bit of heads-up planning would have actually helped us, right? So trade-off management, getting the development teams or the teams who you want to make this change happen, involved a little early. I think those two would be really helpful in a regulated setting. It will avoid a lot of heartburn. Just want to know what you guys think.
Yeah. Actually, that's a very good point. I wish I knew that when we were doing the MiFID regulation. So over to Chad. What do you think in terms of the tech practices? And
well, building on top of what both Tao and Shyam have mentioned, yeah, sometimes in regulated environments, we do end up in a position technically for making shortcuts, hacking parts of systems that we we would prefer not to. And we have to accept sometimes this happens, but how can we deal with it a bit better? Well, from a technical perspective, I think we can get a lot better at communicating the cost and communicating about technical debt and architectural debt in advance. So by doing that, we're better able to help stakeholders really understand the total cost of compliance. It's not just rushing over towards some deadline to that fixed scope that will get us into compliance. It's also got a long and medium-term cost to deal with it in terms of our systems becoming more inflexible or harder to change in future. Ideally, if we do a better job of communicating that cost up front, we can negotiate, influence stakeholders to effectively immediately prioritize addressing that debt as soon as possible after we've met the deadline, made the noise or the pain go away in the short term. One thing I think we should definitely not take shortcuts on in order to support doing this is automated testing, Perhaps we have to make a change in a place we wouldn't like. Perhaps we have to use a part of the system we've been trying to deprecate or move away from over time. But if we don't take shortcuts on automated testing, that provides us a safety net to be able to come back afterwards and move logic to a place we'd rather do it, remove use of that library that's deprecated that we don't want to be using, and get ourselves back into a reasonable level of technical debt while not having this kind of hidden cost of compliance that will make our systems gradually slower to change. So that's, I think, what we need to be able to do as technologists to better work in these regulated and high compliance environments.
I think I agree with your point in that having the foundation, having the automation in place is important so that you can then, I guess, make changes and be safe about it, knowing that your system still works. But I guess in the compliance space as well, automation also adds further advantages in terms of compliance as code and so on, right? So what are your thoughts around that, and how can that be brought in?
Both compliance and code and automated testing, to me, they play together. They're both things that we want to bake into the life cycle of our code and reduce the cost of doing, so that we don't have to trade off that when we're under time pressure.
Yeah.
So if we start building our systems with the mindset that, hey, these regulatory changes are going to come, we need to prepare ourselves for that. We need to invest up front in things like the static analysis tools that can be part of compliance as code, as well as the more traditional automated testing. We're kind of doing that upfront investment so that later on when these things happen, we're able to be able to change and fix the problems that are addressed by working under very tight time frames. It's just a mitigation approach. It just makes it much more important in this type of environment to invest in these aspects of engineering practices.
Definitely, that makes sense. And I think some things that might come in from, I've heard it done before in our clients where we talk about these kind of things, and the first question is like, oh, but then creating all of these automated tests, it's going to slow us down. Maybe, Florian, can you give us some view around, can we move fast while still getting the quality?
Right. I'm guessing that's something that I hear very often, right? So, oh, we're a bank or we're a government, right? So we can't move fast because we need to be really safe, right? We deal with private information, we deal with people's money, right? So we can't move fast, right? We need to be very safe and very reliable with the things we do. But if you look at the organizations that are doing frequent releases, right, that are super reliable in the way they're doing things, they're the same organizations, right? So the high-performing organizations that you read about in the State of DevOps report, they're the same organizations that are fast and reliable and safe because they're using automation, right? So security doesn't become like this checklist you fill in every 2 years. It becomes something that happens on every single build, right? They get this done because they collaborate with regulators and the business and the developers to understand what's actually the intention of this regulation, right? What's actually the outcome we want to reach. So in the end, they become more compliant with the regulation. They create more value faster. So you can actually have it both if you actually believe and actually invest in these practices.
Yep, that's very true. And let's move on. I'm just looking at time. I think we have time for one more question. And I know this question will keep Edward happy. So I think one of the things that we've seen a lot is that, there's the advocacy for cross-functional team. And in the last few years, I've heard a lot, cross-functional team, product team, and project team. And so one of the things that would be a puzzle a lot that I hear the question is like, how do you structure your team? We all believe in collaboration, and cross-functional team seems to be the right way of doing it. What are your thoughts around this?
Firstly, I think as our industry matures, it's almost inevitable that it will gain more complexity, more abstractions, and part of our approach for dealing with that is going to be increasing levels of specialization. Even in the last 10 years, we're seeing disciplines that didn't previously exist in the same way, such as infrastructure, automation, engineering, data engineering, many others. So I think that that does make it harder to construct a truly cross-functional team. You can't add a specialist of all different types to one team without ending up with a completely unwieldy team that doesn't comport with a lot of the other principles within how we'd normally structure high-functioning teams and the Agile principles. So I think cross-functional teams are still important, but we need to get that balance kind of right. And in order to do so, we need to think a bit more about the interactions between our teams and how we might balance those trade-offs. How can we allow teams to work somewhat independently, get the benefits out of specialization in some teams, still have product-focused teams with some level of cross-functionality within them, but not every single role. Now, I'm a big fan of some of the writing in Team Topologies, which is written by Matthew Skelton and Manuel Paich, and in that they give some useful kind of names to different types or archetypes of teams that work in different kind of collaborative approaches with other teams. So from your more traditional product, or they call it a stream-aligned team, to more platform-oriented teams or enabling teams that allow multiple other stream-aligned teams to go faster, perhaps work in more of a consulting mode. And so for anyone who's thinking about, I guess, scaling development and Agile while keeping teams working together towards a goal, I encourage you to have a look at that writing. It's quite a short book and some good videos on the web and on their website. It's well worth a read. I think it will help us give like an ubiquitous language to talk about teams and understand what each other are talking about. So at least that's what I got from it.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll give a different perspective to this, because we usually get called on to say, what's the ideal end state that we need to be in, right?
Yeah.
It's a tricky question. And what we also see is a lot of anti-pattern out there. I wouldn't name, but there are a few consulting companies which go and say, this is your end state, right? This is what Spotify does. This is what X company does. And it's worked great for them. Now, if one were to adopt the team topologies or any of those approaches which are genuinely rightfully minded, and they take the perspective of what, they have been there, they've done that, and it really shows. And on the other hand, you want someone who wants to fix a way of working. There's an anti-pattern, right? One is a very traditional way of saying, I'll get it structured, you just get the job done. And that's a clear violation of the feedback principle, right? Because you're implicitly saying, teams, you guys don't know how to organize yourself, and I'm going to mandate it for you. The second aspect to this is, how are you getting to measure them, right? Team topology incidentally talks about the fundamental unit being the teams, which means you have to be measured on the outcome of the teams. And most organizations don't give that luxury. They still measure individuals on their outputs, not the outcomes as a team. And that creates a whole bunch of anti-patterns. The easiest ones that we still spot, right? We've been spotting it for quite some time, and that's QA testers being asked to report the number of defects that they raise. And the more they raise, the more they are compensated, right? Which is idiotic.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think to your point around measures for the team, I feel that's very, very important. And I know someone in the audience, this is a very good colleague of mine, who said that, you behaved as you're measured. So just an example to what you say, right? We were in a client at one time, and one of the measures for their teams was the percentage of test coverage. So we looked through all the tests. Test coverage was 100%, but we looked through all the tests, and there were no assertions. There were executions of every line of code, but no assertions. So therefore, the coverage is 100%. So this is what we're talking about when we say, let's make sure the right measures, the measures are the outcomes that we want to achieve, and not the output or the wrong kind of measure. So Florian, sorry I interrupted you. Did you want to add something?
Right. Maybe I'll just give you a word of warning, because Chad is absolutely right? things are too complex for a whole team to just do everything, right? From like data engineering and front end and mobile and infrastructure and all those different things, right? So you need to restructure yourself somehow. But what we're seeing in some organizations is that they're actually going backwards, right? So they're saying like, oh, this is too complex having a fully cross-functional team. So let's take all, for example, all our infrastructure engineers, right? They're specialists. So we take all of them and put them over there, right? And we call that the DevOps team. And you raise tickets with them, and then they will do the DevOps thing for you, right? And actually, we've gotten back to what we had before, right? Which is the old IT team. And there is a solution to that, right? And that's what Ankit talked about in the morning, right? Which is to say, yes, we need to specialize in some sense, but we're exposing that specialization not by ticketing system, but by actually more products, right? Your platform products, your data products, your internal documentation, right? Whatever that might be. And producing these products is a cross-functional team, right? That might have specialists, but it also has generalists, right? Or that might also have product-minded people. So that's something to keep in mind, right? So don't feel like you can either have a fully cross-functional team with all the roles or only specialists, right? Products are the way to kind of tie that together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Florian. You have a really good knack of kind of closing the question. So I think before we take on the audience question, I have one last question for you guys. So we've seen a lot of the rise of so many different agile frameworks out there. I've seen SAFe, LeSS, Scrum, Kanban. They all claim to be helping you to get to agility. But what is the right thing? How do we know we're doing the right thing? We're doing SAFe. Is that the right thing? Maybe Shyam, would you like to open?
Okay, that very question is unsafe in my opinion. So if you're starting out, right, pick one, pick anyone, flip a coin, choose whatever it takes. But as you get down to sort of looking at what it offers, obviously every methodology has its practices. There are certain things that it prescribes, certain things that it guides. But you have to be very careful about, are we looking at the right kind of principles? Is it working for us? Most importantly, why are you doing what you're doing, right? And that's a fundamental question. Like every time we go to see or observe a agile team in practice, I would say 80% of the time, I'm not sure how many of the folks here are fans of Scrum Masters or friends with Scrum Masters even, but they end up introducing practices which causes a lot of overheads and gets in the way of value creation. And value is created, as we all know, when people code, right? Everything else is noise. And if the methodology that you use helps you to get to value creation faster and better, go ahead. If it doesn't, think about what doesn't work and have a retrospective on what should be the change, right? That's as simple as it gets. Any prescribed frameworks, I'm not a big fan of prescriptions per se, but I'm a fan of the values and the underlying principles. If you violate, then you have to really have a think about it and have a chat, especially with the team.
Yeah.
Right. But there is value in the prescription, right? In some sense, right? Because if I'm just starting out as an organization, it doesn't help me if I tell you, oh, you'll figure it out, right? I need something to hold on to initially, right? I think the danger comes in if organizations look at that and they buy the book and they say like, okay, right, I got the book, right? So we replace Gantt charts with burnout charts. We replace the status meeting with a stand-up. Okay, we're done, right? And they never touch it again. That brings you into that point where you're not improving, right? You're just taking something that worked for someone else and you just assume it will work for your organization. But every organization is different, right? So you need to start having these retrospectives, right? You need to start looking at, is this working for me? Maybe I need a bit from another framework that works in my case. Maybe I need to throw out the whole framework in the end, right? We're not there to follow the framework. We're there to deliver value, right? So, and every framework, incidentally, has these retrospectives built in, right? So they're kind of already knowing that the book they're writing is not perfect for every situation. But we actually need to use these tools, right? And we actually need to improve constantly.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, these frameworks are models to think about how to build software. And as a saying from statistics goes, all models are wrong, but some are useful. They can be useful when you're starting out, as I've said. I think we're best able to get the most out of them if we decompose them a bit into their building blocks and really reflect on each of those pieces against the principles and and our own context to really think about which of those pieces are working for us.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I think I completely agree with you. I think I like your saying all models are wrong. But I think maybe just sharing some experience from me as well, right? In all of my 10 years at ThoughtWorks, we don't actually practice any agile framework at all. Every team that I have ever been to has always been slightly different, or the practices vary, the kind of things that we have in place vary, and the reason why they're different is because every client is different, and therefore we adjust our processes, we adjust the ways that we work to adapt to the context so that we can then generate value faster within that context. So I think going back to your point, right, like thinking about the principles, thinking about what we're trying to achieve should be the things that we use to drive the kind of things that we put in place. So thank you so much for answering the questions that I have. Now we move on to the audience questions.
Okay.
And thank you, audience, for sending through really good questions. So I've got the first one. So as a company grows and the key stakeholders become a bottleneck, for example, questions about product cannot be answered on the same day. So how do you continue to be agile and continue to deliver fast?
Okay.
Go Sham.
Sham, go for it.
I'm going to interpret the question in a certain way. I don't know if it's intended that way, because you said stakeholders are the bottleneck, and questions about product can't be answered.
I think it's an example, right? So,
it's an example. So
yeah.
First and foremost, the team which is tasked with building the product should know what they're building, and any question should be answerable, no matter how big a team. And we've seen teams of fairly large sizes, several hundred people, and you can still get the answers. But I guess where this question might have its origins is there are too many stages to get get a complete picture of what's happening. And that is a smell, because something, either it's a structure or the way in which teams are operating, or it could also be context losses, right? So you have to, as a team, figure out why is this happening, and is it for a short period of time? We've been in situations like where we've had to reorganize teams for speed, and we've said we are going to go really fast, and the cost of that is a context loss, because now people are going to be hyper-specialized, and hyper-specialized people are going to work on their specialization, right? Which means they are going to just focus on one thing, and if you put them in the other place, you have to make space for knowledge transfer, right? If that's happening, then that's great. But in most organizations, if that's not the case, you will have to really look at this kind of stakeholders being a bottleneck as a smell. Have a retrospective to see, is this person useful? Is this person adding value? What is the most effective way to throw this person out, right, out of any conversation, and do that, right? It doesn't matter who it is. There are techniques to neutralize, right? You can look at a whole bunch of facilitation techniques. So if you really want to have a polite way to tell your boss to say, please get out, there are ways to do that.
Yeah. It sounds like maybe that person is just doing too much. Right? And maybe if you actually talk to them, you would find out like they're completely overloaded. They would love for someone to take some load off them, right? But maybe just because of the way things are structured, maybe that person has all the context, right? Or maybe there's some process that requires approval from that person for all of it, right? So why are they doing so much, right? Can we push down the decision-making to the individual teams who are way closer to the thing they're building, right? So they probably make better decisions most places, right? So is there a way to push that down? Is there a way for decentralization of decision-making, right? You move faster, that person can probably focus on things that are actually in their job, right? Thinking more strategically, thinking more long-term, and then tactical day-to-day decisions, they can be made by the teams.
Yeah, I agree. I guess that comes back to my point earlier about creating self-organizing teams. I mean, one of the benefits, if you get to that level of maturity in your teams, is that what you can often find is that if a product owner is previously a bottleneck, which is obviously usually the most common case of bottleneck, that the product owner becomes more comfortable delegating various parts to the team to solve for them, whether it's a BA on the team, whether it's a Scrum Master if you're doing Scrum, or even the engineers on the team. And then they're able to focus on higher value communication, understanding where they want to go with the product. We have to help support them by getting our teams to that level of maturity, like as engineers engaging more with why we're building the product, able to really understand the product we're building, so that the product owner can have more trust for the team and able to, then they can effectively get out of our way in some sense by being able to provide more of their time to support our queries.
Definitely. I think the ability to give team the autonomy, I think, is the ultimate goal that we want to achieve, right? So if there is bottleneck, you need to introspect and retrospect and see where you can then delegate the conversation or delegate the tasks to free up the people or to get the right person to make the decision. So I've got another question. This one could end up in fights. So it's very controversial, even within ThoughtWorks. So what can be the impact of not estimating stories?
Ooh, okay.
And only picking up stories by priority?
Look, I would love a perfect world with no estimates. Personally, I've seen a lot of time spent estimating, and at times I don't think there's a huge amount of value arguing about whether something's 2 points or 3 points or 5 points. And the common thing, the reason I don't like estimating so much is it's still such a tough thing in the industry to avoid people taking those numbers, translating them mentally to man days, and then we're back to the same old challenge that we ended up in. One of the things that, arguing devil's advocate, that can be a problem if you don't estimate anything, and thinking from a product owner's perspective, is they've got this big backlog of stuff. It's all unestimated. How do they decide whether it's worth working on? How do they have an idea of the value, but they don't really have any notion of how much effort it is. They may not be a particularly technical person. They need some kind of estimate, whether it's points or it's higher level. When you do t-shirt sizing, there's different models that can work for you. But I would think it would be very difficult in their shoes to keep the backlog in a good state if they're not really sure, because they need to prioritize effort against value, and some level of estimation is, I think, probably required to get there. I would suggest you don't try to estimate the next 6 months of the backlog in advance, but there's a middle ground here somewhere where I think we can not estimate too much, but give enough information to product owners and product management to be able to make sensible decisions.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm guessing what is interesting is you don't necessarily need a lot of precision, right? So if I, as a product owner, have identified that this is the most important thing to be working on right now, right? I don't really care if this is taking me 2 weeks or 3 weeks, right? It's the most important thing. We need to get it done. I'm probably interested if it takes 2 weeks or 2 years.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't care too much, right? So what's actually the right level of precision we need in estimation? Why are we doing the estimation? Are all interesting questions to ask, right? And then it becomes a much more interesting conversation than should we estimate or not.
I'm going to go on the other side.
The fight starts.
So there are elements that I agree, right? First, it's an estimate, so we have to respect that it's not a commitment. Second, the level of granularity is going to be dependent on the level of uncertainty that you have, right? If I ask you about something that's totally uncertain, your estimate can be anything, right? And can be anybody's guesstimate. But there is an element of, the question here is, shouldn't priority alone be good enough, right? Now, often, behaviorally speaking, we all associate a certain cost of doing things, everything in life, right? Whether it's taking the MRT or taking a taxi. There's a cost associated with taking a certain action. Priority-wise, I want to go home fast, spend time with my family, right? And by that means I should just book the cab. But realistically, when I see a limo cab turning up, the Kiasu person is going to say, this is a limo cab, don't take it, right? Because I have subconsciously associated a cost of what is acceptable to me and what's not. Same thing happens to most of the product managers and the well-founded ones. Second thing that would also complicate this matter is I have never, ever seen a project where the estimates have come down, right? A 5-pointer grows up, multiplies, has kids, becomes a 10-pointer, 50-pointer, right? And rightfully so, because you, again, uncover things along the way.
Absolutely.
So what we need is that pragmatic planning, but I would not just go about and say, let's not do estimate, let's keep going along, right? Even if I have infinite budget, I would still want to see whether am I really spending it in the most acceptable way, right? There are proponents, and we've often been challenged, right? I personally have been attacked within ThoughtWorks to say, there is this concept of no estimates, haven't you heard of it, right? To which my response is, great, no estimates is good, but as a BA, if I wear the business analyst hat, then I'm just assuming that I can granularly size everything of a roughly equal-sized story or a task, whatever. And that's hard. I've spent quite a bit of time to analyze how to write the perfect story, how to slice it, and I'll tell you it's really, really hard if you actually try to put it in practice. So for those reasons, my answer is going to be on the extreme end, which is yes, estimates are important at the right level of granularity.
Yeah, I mean, even in my role as a technical lead, I would really struggle to prioritize, say, technical work on the backlog if I don't have a notion of how difficult it is. As a technical lead, there's often lots of different cross-functional or non-functional requirements you have to deal with. And yes, I have a priority for which one I want to tackle first, or I think is most important in our context. But if I'm not really sure how we're going to go about doing it or how involved the solution we're thinking about to meet our goals are, I wouldn't really feel comfortable with the prioritization. Now, I think if you get to quite a mature level, either in your team in terms of how broken down your stories are or how broken down addressing your cross-functional requirements are, I can feel much more comfortable doing that with no estimates. I can look at something and say, okay, that's pretty similar to this other thing we did a few weeks ago, and that took about this long. Yeah, that'll probably, here's how we can vaguely project out a while. But yeah, the balance is a tough one.
Definitely.
I'll probably add one thing, which is the anti-pattern behavior on both extremes, right?
Yes.
As a developer, give that feedback, right? You estimated something, you uncover more challenges along the way. You have to have the trust and also the freedom within the team to speak up and say, hey, you know what, it's more complex than we envisioned. And if you're a Scrum Master product manager, don't pin them down to the nail and then say, you said 3 points, get it done. If not, don't go home. Don't do that either, right? Because if you try doing that, just pair with the developer, see what they go through. I'm pretty sure if you just look through their screens for about 15 minutes, you're going to tell them, take how much ever time you want, I'm going to go speak to the bosses, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Great to see a BA with so much empathy for the developer. But I think I feel like we're all kind of in consensus that I think estimates is necessary to a certain level where it allows us to help with prioritization and deciding the order of work and so on. But I like to go back to what Florian mentioned, that, are we estimating for the sake of estimating? Do we have enough information to estimate? Can we actually trust the estimate that we give? So those are the questions that we should continuously ask.
And even how do we reduce the cost of estimating?
Absolutely,
stuck in a room
yes.
for 4 hours, not very helpful. It's an estimate. It's not a commitment that's going to last the rest of your life. You're not getting married.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes
Cool.
there is an acceptable cost to those 4 hours.
Really?
All right, but that's all we have time for today, and thank you so much for being with us all the way until the end, and thank you, panel, for your great thoughts and input.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
That's it. All right.